for me.
Okay.
Did
Okay, I made you a
you can make me a co-host. I think if you're making me a co-host, it'll work.
I just did
Okay,
that.
perfect. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so let's see. So we're at the point where we have here and there different concepts to help that help deepen our understanding of the dressing, but also, well, we'll see. We'll see. It's like, I don't want to say bits and pieces exactly, but there's a few different elements that haven't been discussed that that need to reach some completion. So let me see. We'll start from here. Okay, the first thing that's of special relevance is that the Maavar Yabok places an emphasis on the involvement of women in the preparation of the dead, meaning that it was considered to be always traditionally the province of women specifically to make tachrichim and to do primary preparations, especially of the levushin, the garments. And it's not just because women know how to do those things or that's the thing that women do, because the reality of women being involved in textiles, like that's the, you know, the place of the woman will say, like it says in the Talmud, that her wisdom is in the felach, is in the spinning wheel or in the weaving, right? That it says in the Talmud that the women's wisdom is in the weaving. We'll see that it's relevant also to our understanding of the women's role in Chevra Kadisha, because although the Maavar Yabok presents it as that women are involved in the earlier stages, and that then men do later stages, meaning that by the time you get to the point of the Tahara itself, that the men do the Tahara, but we know that men do for men and women do for women. He doesn't deal so much with the separation of genders. He's talking about that even when it comes to the preparation of men for burial, women are involved in a certain point of until a certain point, it's in the responsibilities in the hands of women. And in addition, he alludes to this idea that also, like it says in the Talmud, that women are the maspidos, that women are the not so much making the hespedim at a funeral, the eulogies, but the ones who lament over the dead, that the crying out over the dead is something that's uniquely relevant to women. So I thought that it would be something that actually you should see a little bit more of an examination of this, because I think that it also helps to inform the work in Chevra Kadisha. Okay, so we're over here. Okay, הנקבות, עליהן מוטל המצווה ראשונה להתעסק בצורכי המת. And this is why women, it's upon them to do the primary aspects of the needs of the dead. להכין לה זפתן מלבד מה שאמרו במדרש בראשית רבה וכולי. So to prepare the garments, aside from what it says in the Medrash in Bereishis Rabbah, שהולכות אצל המת תחילה, that it was customary for women to be in the first row of the mourners. Like that women, we're used to, like culturally, in most Orthodox communities at least, it's very customary that like the ones who are most around the Aron are men, and that women sort of tend to be in a little bit of a remove. But that wasn't the traditional arrangement. Women were the first to go out after, women were the first to go out after the mace, because it was understood that loss, the mourning over the loss, is something that came natural to women, and that women being close to the mace are the ones who cry, the women who cry and who are moved over the loss are the ones who then uplift and bring the emotions of the rest of the tzibur to come to the surface, because the women who are close to the mace are the ones who instigate all of the opening of the mourning. Now, I have a friend who's Moroccan, and she says to me, I don't go to funerals. I can't go to funerals. I say, why can't you go to funerals? She says, because You don't know what it's like. Like, do we have anybody here who's Moroccan? She says, in strong traditional communities, so women still do a lot of the wail. She says the women wail, they wail, they wail. It's like she's I can't, my nerves can't take it. This the wailing at the funeral. I said to her, that's what the Gemara describes, the wailing of the women, and the fact that it's something that's stayed in certain communities is it's so marked, that it's like very, very different practice. I don't want to say it's like Ashkenazic funerals tend to be more like it's more contained, right? And she tells me, no, the funerals among Moroccans are very, very, it's the women who and she said, and then I can't bear it. And that's the idea. You can't bear it because it was the assumption among the sages that the unrestrained emotion of the women of loss is something that awakens the heart of the rest of the tzibur. So why? Now, the emotional lability of women to be able to feel the loss and express it, the Maavar Yabok doesn't say it's because women are highly emotive. He says it's because women are more deeply associated with mortality, because Chava was the one who brought mortality to the world. And so the outward expression of this is that we think it's about women being assumed to be more emotional, but he says no, it's because we feel the acuteness of the loss, because we feel a certain it's a soul, deep in the soul, a sense of achrayus, a sense of responsibility. And so because the Maavar Yabok, he's speaking from the language of Kabbalah, the idea that women need to be involved in the process, that women have to make the tachrichim, that women are so, and we know also for the preparation of women for burial, so certainly in Chevra Kadisha, women are responsible, but he means for everybody that women are so tied up, are so bound up with the preparation of the dead is a tikkun. It's part of the process of repair. And so it's natural that it should be this way. And we'll see there's also certain other qualities that women have on the spiritual plane that make it especially beneficial for women to be involved in the work of Chevra Kadisha, and also even prior to that in the preparation of burial clothes. Od, yeah. So that's the first one, but Od lefi darkeinu, so he means to say here, according to our way of explaining things, he means according to the lessons, there's 112 chapters in this book, Kiminyan Yabok, it's Maavar Yabok. So the river Yabok that Yaakov Avinu crossed over, where he had his conflict with Esav, and where he went back for the Pachim Ktanim, the ford of the river Yabok. So Yabok is 112, right? Yud, Bet, and Kuf, 112. So it's an allusion to the fact there's 112 chapters, distinct chapters in the book. But also it's about crossing over the river, meaning it's the book that deals with the passage over the river from the land of the living to the land of the dead. Or as we say, the land of the living is really the land of the dead, right? We call that the land of the living. We call the place of the dead the land of the living. So from Chaim lechaim, right? Going from life to a different kind of life. So it's this passage over this river. So he says, Lefi darkeinu ne'emar shekein, eshes chayil batach balev bala. He's now going to weave in certain verses from Eshes Chayil and from other psukim as well, about the place of how appropriate it is for women to be involved in the weaving up of a person's life. Because the preparation for burial is he ties it together not only with the actual weaving of the burial clothes and tachrichim, but with the weaving up of a person's life. So he brings the pasuk Eshet Chayil. It says, right, Eshet Chayil miyimtza batach balev bala, the woman of valor, and then he skips batach balev bala. Her husband's heart trusts in her, and then he skips again to another pasuk Vosa b'chefetz kapea, and she uses her hands to carry out her will. with good, she's like with alacrity. Bechefetz means she does it willingly and with a lot of energy. So she's energetic in the work of her hands. And he's talking, what he's alluding to is that women are associated with the sphere of Malchus, that women are associated with the bottommost of the sphirot, which is the kli kibul. It's a receptive quality of drawing together all of the influences that come from on high, that come through all of the channels of all of the spheres above, in order to reveal in this world God's kingship, and that's why it's called Sfirat HaMalchut. It's called the sphere of kingship. Now, women are specifically associated, especially associated with the sphere of Malchus for many, many reasons, one of which is women's business of being preoccupied with physical things, meaning that it is considered, nowadays, we're not allowed to say things like this because we're not allowed to make distinctions in terms of gender of who's responsible for what and who does what. However, it's still for all of our great changes that we've gone through socially, it is still the case that women tend to be what we say fanumen in Gashmis, much more involved in taking care of the nitty-gritty details of physical life, the preparation of food and the maintenance of home and the actual hands-on labor of the raising of a family in its nitty-gritty physicality. This is something that no matter how much change has taken place, we're still in the world where women and the world of asiyah, of actually getting your hands dirty, like getting down and doing it into the nitty-gritty, is something that is still associated with women particularly. Now, everybody has to do it because we're all creatures living in this world having to navigate through a physical universe, but women especially so. And that's not considered to be something that's negative, quite the contrary. We, al pisod, according to Kabbalah, we say, no, it suits the spiritual nature of women to be this involved in the nitty-gritty of things down in the world, because they have a particular quality to be able to reveal God's kingship down in the realm of the most physical of physical places. And so this is considered an advantage. And it's not even so much an advantage, it's just a reality. It's just, that's the facts. So it being the facts, it says he weaves all these psukim together, and he says it's proper, it makes sense, lefi darkeinu, according to a more inward understanding of women and what they are, what we are and what we can do in our spiritual potentialities, that at the time of a person leaving this world, that women should be specifically involved in the weaving together of the threads of their life to be able to send them off, because this world, the life of this world, is what he's going to say. Let's look back here in the text. Her husband's heart trusts in her, and she does her work, the work of her hands, with a will, right? She does it with great willingness. What does she do? Lahachin bigdei malchut leba'ala mikoach ma'asav v'yit'orerut hatachtonim. It is especially the province of Malchus, and he's drawing a line, like the Kabbalists do, between actual women living in an actual world, right, living in the actual world, and the quality of Malchus. Just like Malchus has its power, right, is to generate bigdei malchut leba'ala. That means to say, to generate garments, projections, right, of God's glory, that mikoach ma'asim v'hit'orut hatachtonim, from the power of the actual day-to-day deeds of human beings down here in the physical world. That's called part of the work of the sphere of Malchus. That means you take a glass of water and you make a blessing on it, right? So it's called, this is a typical Malchus activity, because what I've done is I'm interacting with something in the physical world, I have a glass of water in front of me, and I'm spiritualizing the experience of drinking, which would otherwise be just a purely physical experience. And then we say the sphere of Malchus gathers that like a thread. That's like a thread that gets woven together with endless other threads of the way that we spiritualize our navigation through physicality, and in so doing, declare God's kingship here, which would otherwise be concealed. That's called Malchus work. So she prepares bigdei malchus leba'ala mikoach ma'asim v'yit'orerut hatachtonim ki tzav letzav. It says in Yeshayahu, tzav letzav. It means One mitzvah, he's playing on words. It's one mitzvah, and one mitzvah, it's another line of connection, another thread. Perush. Mikol mitzvah u mitzvah kav lekav. That's the continuation of the pasuk. Mitzav letzav, kav lekav. One command joined together with another. One line joined together with another. He says from every single mitzvah, ne'eragim chutim v'kavim lilvush yakar. You are woven together from every single mitzvah, these precious, precious threads that come together into the totality of a precious garment. Umehen hameorer notel chelek. V'chein amar Shlomo chochmaso noda b'sharim bala. So he's just talking about, right now, he's talking about the sphere of Malchus. But in his speaking about it, he's telling us this is why women are so involved in the process of the preparation of the begadim and the preparation, also the earlier parts of the preparation to prepare the body. Yirtzeh shemesibat lefushim ha'ikavim she'itkina lenegdo v'lo eishes chayil noda shemiyada ba'olam. I'm gonna go on. He's already getting more into a discussion of Malchus. Here, let's go on. Here, so this is all done. Bechefetz kapeh, right? This is in the second line. It's chefetz kapeh, with the desire of her hands, with these willing hands, and he calls this chochmat hapelech, shehi chochma miyuchedet la. This is the wisdom, or the art of the weaving, which is considered to be uniquely the art and province of women, la'arog, to weave together hashpaot elionot and v'orot mikoach ma'asim, to weave together a fabric, a spiritual fabric from the power of one's deeds. So let's bring it back to the work in the Chevra Kadisha. So you have, we've spoken about this before, that your responsibility and the opportunity that you have is through your kavana, through your thoughts and your intentions and your desires, is to weave up together the life of this person and the body itself into a holy totality, wrapped in a holy garment, to be able to await its time of resurrection. And the idea of he was also speaking specifically about the garments, because we had talked about the brechitza. We have to talk a little bit more. It's kind of jumping around. We'll talk a little bit more about the teskabin, about the water, but the garments, to see that the dressing is more than just putting on a garment of kavod. It's more than just about putting on, making sure that the body is not disgraced, right? That the person is not disgraced. Quite the contrary, you have the textile, the fabric itself, your opportunity to enwrap the mesa in the garments, in the wrapping, is, remember, it's like thread. What's the thread count? The threads, the textile itself is called, like, women are uniquely connected to the weaving together of the goodness and the merits of a person's life, so that it makes a total fabric that covers them and brings them kavod in the next world, and brings them honor in the next world. So you don't know this person. You don't have to know this person, because every single person's life is filled with threads, endless threads and endless lines of goodness and generosity and good intentions. And because you're dealing with Jews, and it's the way of, you always assume, right, that afilu rekanim shebach mitzvos kirimon, that the Jewish people are filled with good midot, that are filled with mitzvot, they are filled with every good thing. And so even if you don't know the specifics of this person's life, it doesn't matter, because every single person is being wrapped in this tapestry of all of the threads that came together in their life, that's considered to be, like, women uniquely suited to recognizing and building such a fabric. You know, I have a friend who, I have a very close friend who just came back. She's actually not yet back, because she's in Florida paying Shiva call with the family. But but Yitti and Reb Tzvi, who had died in this collapse of the Surfside building in Florida. Yes, do you know what I'm talking about? So the funeral was the other day. It was in New York, and so they were buried in the cemetery in Old Montefiore. And then she came, this very good friend, she went to the funeral, flew out from Los Angeles to the funeral, and then down to Florida to spend time with the family who was sitting in Florida. And so she said she's been sending me, like, for the last, since it happened, she's been sending me like so many bits and pieces, like all these threads of Itzy's life she's been sharing with me. And I feel already now, of course, I feel like I know her, and I wish that I had been best friends with her, because everybody was best friends with her. And then I saw her right after she left the funeral, and she said to me, I hope I brought them, I hope I brought the family, when they saw me at the funeral, I hope I brought them, what did she say? She said consolation and a bracha. And I said, so the before going, she had like a kvedut, to go. It's not so simple to like get up and go and what you're gonna face when you go. And she said, I heard Itzy's voice telling me in my ear, go get a fantastic outfit on and come to my levaya. I heard it in my ears. Put on a fantastic outfit and come to my levaya. And Itty loved boots. Everyone, she had like an obsession with boots. So this friend of mine wore designer boots. She wore these fancy designer boots to the funeral, out of cover to her dear friend. And when she got there, so she told me the sisters and the daughters, they saw the boots. First thing they saw the boots. And they said, they started to laugh and cry at the same time, to laugh and to cry at the same time. She said, oh, you, the only one who wore the boots. Like, we should have all remembered to wear the boots. So when she told me this, I said, certainly you brought them bracha and nechama. There's no question. Because anytime a person is laughing and crying at the same time at the funeral of somebody that they love, that's called the biggest bracha and nechama. And how do you weave it together? The reason why I'm bringing it in is it's such a thin little detail, right? It's such a thin thread. The business of showing up in the boots, right? That a person's life is made up of such a multitude of such threads of who they are and what made them uniquely them, and the things that they loved, and the ways in which they made other people happy, and the ways in which, and the reasons why everybody loved them, and all the things that they brought to the world. It's like thread upon thread upon thread. So when you're holding the fabric in your hand and you're dressing when you're dressing the body, so you say, what a fabric of life I have, of all of the Nakustovas, all of the beautiful points of this person. Even if I don't know them, I know that they had them, because there's no such thing as a person who doesn't have them. And whatever they are, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should weave them in because I'm here, like you are you're sort of the last stop. You're almost the last stop, right? Before the person is going to go to the final place. So here you are weaving it all together, but the weaving all together is in your own intention of giving respect to the person's life and how complex a tapestry of goodness and all of its detail and preciousness, which is only known to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's considered to be that women know how to do this. Women should do the garments, because only a woman is going to remember to wear the booties to the funeral. You know what I'm saying? The fancy designer boots to the funeral. Like, only that's the kind of thing, that's a kind of detail of the fineness of the preciousness of a person's life in all of its complexity. That's the kind of thing that women have awareness of. And that's what is honored when the Maavar Yabok says that women know the felach, that women know the weaving, as it says in the Talmud, right? That women are their wisdom is in the weaving. It's because they understand the complexity, and the it's not only complexity. It's like the multitude of every single strand having to be woven together in order to create a life. What's the fabric of a life? So ashrechen, ashrechen. Yes, Alyssa.
So there's a lady in our group from Wales, and she described when she was a child coming downstairs into the kitchen on Motzi Shabbos, and her grandmother was weaving tachrichim, making them on the kitchen table. Just seems very apropos.
It's it's considered to be tachrichim to acquire them. It's a segula for long life, right? Although that's only true if a person is not sick. I want to point out that that's only true if a person is not sick. I remember when I had suggested to my father, Zichron Livracha, I wanted to know if he thought I should commission tachrichim as a school for long life for my mother. And he said, no, for me, no. And at that point, he was not very, very ill, but he never was well. Like not since, almost my whole life. He had major health issues always. So I kind of questioned it. And then I spoke to my husband about it. And he said, no, it's a bechinas al tiftach bet. That for someone who's already of compromised health, they don't have to be sick, already of compromised health, it's already like opening the door to something that you shouldn't open the door to. But for someone who's otherwise in good health, yes. But the tachrichim were what was considered to be like the best of the best tachrichim had to do with the righteousness of the woman who wove them. Quality tachrichim were produced by it had nothing to do with the quality of the textile. It had to do with the spiritual quality of the woman who wove them. Okay, now let's see. Alkin, yes, Irene. Wait, unmute.
Yes, sorry. I learned,
first of all, Irene, where are you?
I'm in London. I learned that in France, the bride gets them made for her trousseau.
What a powerful minhag.
Yeah.
Ada Yom Hazeh, still, that was the custom, or it was a medieval custom?
No, not medieval, but I don't know if it's very recent now, but in our grandparents and possibly
really, until recent memory.
Yeah,
because it's like if you tell a bride that now, well, when we buy the linens, should we also buy the tachrichim? They'll take it amiss. But most of it has to do with people's with a kind of cognitive dissonance about death that's become ever more common because death has gotten further and further away from most people. And it's not like it was generations ago where it was the most common thing for everybody to have had at least some direct contact with death before getting into adulthood even, because elderly grandparents died at home. They didn't necessarily die in hospital. And it was just something that was part of life. Now it's very much at a remove. When I tell people, I had a situation where the only avelim, because of the family circumstances, was the wife and the daughter. And so, but they wanted to bring a minyan. Which of course, the husband hadn't passed away at home. He had passed away in the hospital. And there weren't brothers, there's no brothers and there's no sons or anyone else who need a minyan to come to them because they have to daven. So in such a case, do you need to bring a minyan to the house? The answer is, of course, not. And it's a question whether it's even advisable to do so because there's no reason to. It's like matriach the tzibur. It makes a big tirch on the tzibur. In the end, a minyan was brought, a sefer Torah was brought, a minyan was brought because it was only in order to ease the heart of the wife who really felt like if she didn't have a tefillah going 3 times a day, and this was in the middle of coronavirus, it was really quite complicated. It wasn't so simple to be able to organize it, but there was no halachic necessity. And when the issue came up, I explained, the bringing of having minyanim in the house, it's the origin, it has to do with, especially because the assumption was that people died at home. Meaning it's considered to be a beneficial for the nifter to have the tefillas in the place where he or she passed away, because because the soul is considered to have more connection to the place where they died. In any case, yeah. So the tachrichim nowadays, it's like something that if you tell a bride, I'll pay for the tachrichim, could have them already in place, they'll think you're crazy. Barbara.
Yeah. I remember my grandmother, who was a big tzaddikus, her old lady friend and herself, they made their own tachrichim, and there was always a box on top of her closet, and wherever she went, she took the tachrichim. I didn't know that then. I was a young girl, but she lived to 98, and I heard that it's a big schooler to have tachrichim. But then on the other hand, I did a tahara, and I remember they brought along someone's tachrichim, but because of the old age, it was stained. We couldn't use it, but I think we put it in the aron with her. I don't remember what we did, but
I always wondered,
that.
I always felt like, is it a skula? Are the tachrichim a skula because the kind of person who is conscious of their mortality and understands that life ends at a certain point and they're preparing for it, such a person already has a lot of schuyot, they already have a lot of merit, that their head is already focused on the tachlis, that they know where they're going. And so this itself helps them have a longer life. Barbara, where are you? Where do you live?
Queens, New York.
We're in Queens.
Queens, New York.
We're in Queens. I'm from Queens.
Kew Garden Hills.
I mean, I spent my high school years, my teen years, I spent we grew up in Hillcrest.
Oh, wow. Okay, very close.
Okay.
Right.
Yudis, is there
Yes.
an idea that the neshama goes to the shiva house? So you say like it's better to
Yes.
have the minion in the shiva house.
Okay, so the thing is, right. So the thing is about the neshama going to the shiva house. Yes, that's why shiva is supposed to be held in the place where the person lived, because the neshama is going to be gravitating either to where after the body is buried. It's not so much the neshama. Remember, the neshama goes up on high. The neshama has its own story. The issue is what we call a rishimu. There's a person's soul has many, many levels and facets to it. It's a single entity that has many, many dimensions. So the part of the soul that's still attached to the body, or that is still attached to this world, or that still feels more at home in this world than it does in the next world, because it's a process of detachment and of moving on. That's not something, not for everybody does it happen immediately. And so that's one of the reasons why there's a difference between the 7 days and shloshim and the year. All of those are gradual liftings, not only for the mourners, but also for the neshama itself while it's going through its process. So the lower part of the soul it wants to stay around where it left the body, first of all, because that's where it left the body, meaning it's a significant spot. That's why it's so, it always, for me, is very heartbreaking, all of these deaths that take place in the hospital, because they're not where the person lived. So the deeper Sfarim explained that the soul, it's either about where the person passed away, which was always presumed to be at home in the best of all circumstances, right? Not always would it happen, but in the best of all circumstances, it would have happened at home. Now, otherwise, the person, the soul, the lower part of the soul wants to be where they lived, where life was going on. And so it's assumed that in the base Evel, which should be where the person actually lived, not in some alternative spot, the shiva is supposed to take place where they actually lived. Yes. It's first primarily upon women to be preoccupied with the needs of the dead. And the shrouds, the tachrichim should be prepared rishon rishon. There's a certain proper order to it, milmata lemala, from below to above. Hachaluk hasamuch lebsaro kodem lakol, achar kach habate shokayim. First is the garment that comes closest to the flesh, and afterwards the bate shokayim, and afterwards there's what goes over the legs, v'chein bahadraga, and so on, added to one after the other. V'sod hatfira, I'm not going to go into sod hatfira. Enough. Here. אחר שעשו לו הנקבות תיקון המתייחס להן מבחינתן, באים האנשים על הנשים. And once the women have done their part of the work, then the men come and they do the rest of the work, which has to do with the washing and the tahara itself, which is a hachana l'kedusha, which is preparation for holiness. Now, even though in Chevra Kadisha women do the washing and the women do for women the washing and the tahara, but the implication of the Maavar Yabok is it's possible that in his time the custom was that the later stages that men did them. Now let's see. One second. Okay. This idea, this is here about the Talus. Now, in America, we in Israel, in Yerushalayim, we follow different customs from Chutz La'aretz. There are certain differences. So, Irene, you had your hand up?
Yes, because I wanted to know about the men. You were saying the women and then the men come in. I just was wondering.
That's what Maavar Yabok says. This is what the Maavar Yabok says, which implies, it seems to indicate that it was the preparation of all people for burial went through a two-stage where the women were involved in the first process, and then men came and they were involved in the second stage of the process. But that's clearly not what we do any longer. If that's indeed was the custom to do at that time, this is not something that we continue with. But the idea is really what he says, that women being involved in the primary process has to do with weaving up and finishing up and detaching from life, meaning from the life of this world, whereas the later stage of the tahara is about preparation for the holiness of the next world. And so each whether it's women doing the first stage, then it's more appropriate for men to do the second. But nowadays we don't do it this way. We separate by gender. Yizaher ha'adam haruchet tzameh. We spoke about this earlier. He mentions it any number of times in the Sefer, to be very careful not to leave any dirt on the body. And also and also whoever is doing the burial, the person who is doing the actual burial should make sure that there's no earth left upon the face of the nifter. Because this would be something that would be humiliating to the person. As we saw earlier, so the body is an analog for the qualities of the soul. And so we're very careful. Part of our care with the dead is not just because we're mechabed them, not just because we're honoring them, but it's out of recognition that the body is just a physical analog of all of the qualities of the soul. So the body is itself, it's not only because it was a package that held the soul, but because all of its properties and all of its parts are directly analogous to the different qualities and powers of the soul. And so we're especially mechabed to make sure that it should be in as good a condition as possible. Umatzati, she'en le'itatef hamet ela b'talit shel tzemer v'levan. So now in terms of the garment, okay, so in Chutz La'aretz, the practice is so you tell me, because I know a little bit more about Minhag Yerushalayim. So you tell me about what's done. Tell me.
Which stage?
At the stage of dressing, and then at the stage of tachrichim, and about the talus. You tell me.
Well, so we don't put talus on, so we don't know about
I
that.
understand. So, but we're going to talk about it anyway because it has relevance, because the use of the talus is indicative of something else. So even if you're not in actual practice using the talus, although, even if you're not in actual practice using the talus, there are certain relationships between the wrapping of the talus and wrapping in general. So tell me, talk to me. You tell me about the garments, each of the garments.
We do the headdress first. Do the bonnet in our chevra in Providence, Rhode Island. We do the head bonnet, and then the veil. That's first, and then we do the pants, and then we do the little straps that go under the knee cap. There's two little straps that go under the kneecap that we tie, and then we do the two robes.
Okay.
And then we do the girdle around.
And the girdle around.
Barbara?
Sorry.
We do it differently.
Okay, so let's see. I would like to hear what's done in different places.
Okay, in the Chevra of Queens, we do the bonnet first, and then we try to put the top garment on first, and then we put the pants, and then we tie. First the bonnet is tied by the roche, and then we tie really simultaneously the waistbands, and then the bendles on the feet. Someone else does the feet, and two people do the waistband, and then we put the outer garment on. The kids are like, and we tie it. And the last thing we do is put the face mask on.
The last thing you do is put on the veil.
Right, the veil. I'm sorry, the veil.
Okay, so
that's how we do it.
That it's important. I felt like it's important. You get trained in doing whatever is the custom in the place where you are. It's important to realize that the actual order, all of the specifics of practice are not something that's exactly halachic. It's about custom and what community got established wherever your community is, and that has to do with Chevra Kadisha practices in other parts of the world before people came to the United States and before even they came to England. So minor variations in practice are just a historical reality. That's just a reality of the divergence of our communities all over the world. Now, for men, they wrap in the talus, in a puzzle talus. Someone's on the phone. Someone's saying something.
Yeah, Yehudis, can I interject for 1 second?
Sure.
Just in terms of Barbara, just in terms of the minhag of the Chevra Kadisha of Queens, I remember Tzipora once teaching me when I started in Queens, like 25 years ago, that the reason we put on the veil last was a practical reason. It wasn't necessarily following the minhag, but because she wanted to keep the veil clean. And obviously the face is always covered, but the veil went on at the very, very end because it was subject to when we were moving around dressing, that the veil would get dirty if the nifteret would spit up. Sorry to interject.
No. It's important to hear. So it's not. What were you gonna say?
I also wanted to say that there's so many practical parts to it, so it's hard to know what's important and what's just a practical thing. And it always bothers me that we always put the pants on before the shirt. And from what I know from general is that dressing should go from the top to the bottom. So I was curious about that.
Okay, so the dressing goes from the top to the bottom. When a living person gets dressed, you're mechabed the upper part of the body. We tend to honor the upper part of the body before the lower part of the body. However, generally speaking, the preference is to make sure that the makom erva is covered. That the genitals are covered.
Good idea.
See, like if I'm getting dressed, right? So when you're getting dressed, you as a living person, you're not being
covered.
Exactly. You have means at your disposal to be able to ensure that the undergarment, right, that you can strip off and put on garments in a seder in an order that doesn't leave your genitals exposed and allows you to put on the upper garment first. Just like it says in Shulchan Aruch. The only thing is you can't do this you can't do this for the niftaris because the niftaris has to be washed all at once and the tahara has to be all at once. And afterwards, the dressing, the question is, what's the priority? To be mechabed the head, to put on the bonnet, that's a common practice to first cover the head, is like showing we're mechabed the rosh. We are honoring the head,
Yeah.
but it's still not. It still makes sense that the dressing of the lower part of the body, like the Maavar Yabok says, milamata lemala, also has great significance because first of all, you're covering makom erva, and also remember he brought about milamata lemala in the idea of you're wrapping up the person's life, right? You're weaving together the person's life, and so that when a person leaves this world, that's a process that's milamata lemala.
Right. Thank you. Well, that took a load off.
I think
Irene?
that's why we have two bonnets, because in our chevra, we put the first bonnet on, and then we do the pants and the first shirt, then the bows wherever we're going to do them on the feet and everything. Then in terms of the big garments, then the big coat. Then we have the second bonnet that goes on, and at the same time we put soil in by the eyes at that time, and then we put on the collar and the apron and the girdle, and that's how we finish off. Yeah.
So in all, whatever is the particular practice of where you are, to bear in mind always about the garments as being clean, beautiful, bright garments of light woven together of all the goodness of a person's life that you get to place on them to prepare them for the burial and for their final rest. Now, the Talus, the reason why I want to talk about the Talus a little bit, even though it's not relevant to women, is because of what it represents. Because in Eretz Yisrael, Minhag Yerushalayim is not to bury in a Talus. Men are not buried in a Talus. They go to the grave in the Talus, and the Talus is removed at the grave site, and they're placed in the grave. We don't have a coffin here. The body is placed inside of the grave on chains. That's the practice is on the chains, on the motot, and then burial without any other covering. And so the removal of the Talus, so in outside of Eretz Yisrael, there's a lot of halachic discussion over the course of many centuries about the proper use of the Talus and what's the idea of the Talus. But it's really just an extension of the idea of the tachrichim. It says specifically to use the Talus of wool. Why? Because wool represents chesed, the whiteness of the wool. In the case of the tachrichim, it's not wool. You're using for the tachrichim, you're using them. Here we have the linen, or it's a kind of a muslin, and there you're using also the same thing. It's a linen, or but that's for the whiteness and for to be similar to the Kohanic garments, right? The linen is so that it's similar to the B'nai Kehuna, but the Talus is tzemer. It means to say, what's the person cloaked in for the end? What's the person cloaked in for the burial? Is tzemer and lavan, means chesed. The wool, why is wool representative of chesed? Even if you're not using wool, just bear in mind. Because sheep, like it just gives off of it just freely gives its wool. You shear the sheep, you clean it, you card it, you spin it, and then you have wool, right? You have a textile. And with flax, it's the opposite. The flax is grown and it has to be beaten until it becomes this material that you can then transform into a textile. So it means it's like all this effort, there's a huge expenditure of effort that goes into creating linen. But when it comes to wool, it's like ki'ilu, it's like clouds of wool that fall from heaven. You understand? It's like the white woolly beard of a Saba, of a beautiful, generous, loving grandfather with the white woolly beard of just love. Like when you're a parent, when the father is a father, so the darkness of the beard means he's still got a lot of, he's still got a lot of toughness in him. But you know how it is, the stuff that bothers fathers, by the time they get to be big sabas, So Kleinigkeit, Narishkeit, it doesn't matter, like who cares? And that's always the big paradox of children is like, you think you look at Saba and he's like Mr. Nice Guy, and your mother's saying to you, oh, you should have seen what he was like when I was a kid. And the kids don't believe it. Why? Because there's this transformation in the whiteness of the beard. So wool for us, for the Jewish people, every place that it shows up, wool is a deep, deep symbol of chesed and the ripening of sweetness and kindness and love and mercy that descends downward like the beard, right? Like the wool just grows and it grows outward and it comes down. That just needs to be sheared and it can be made into a garment. So the incorporation of the wool, it means even if you're not using the talus, but you're like the talus. There's a Reb Nosson of Breslov says, it's really from Rabbi Nachman in Likutei Moharan. He says, it's the practices the kala, the bride, gives her chatan the talus, right? That's the custom, is that ahead of the wedding that she gives him the gift. And that's because the bride, the wife, doesn't wear a talus, she is a talus. She is the talus. When young men would come to Rabbi Nachman and ask him for advice, personal advice and direction, he would say, go get yourself a talus and then come back. He meant go get married and then come back to me. I can't really help you until you're married. You need a talus. So the talus, so you have the overpowering chesed of a person's goodness, right? Of the goodness that they're connected to, from that women bring that. So even if women are not buried in the talus, try to bear in mind, women are the talus. The protective cover of kindness, right? And love and mercy in the family, in the life of the people that they're close to. That's called women being the talus. So talus is also a protection. What were we going to say? Yes, Etna.
So when in Israel, when they're in the talus and then they get buried, and then what happens to the talus?
Talus is given back to the family, and it's not made puzzle. We don't, because in Chutz La'aretz, the custom is to clip part of it to render it invalid, because it's considered to be bazla. It's considered to be a kind of mocking of the dead, to have the mitzvah garment that when there's no mitzvah to be performed anymore. That's one of the reasons why when going to the cemetery, the practice is for men who keep their tzitziot out to put them inside of the pockets or inside of the pants, so that they shouldn't be buzz larash, it's called, mocking the poor. So they're supposed to be put away. So in Eretz Yisrael, what's done is the nifter is taken to the grave site in the talus. And this is true for women also. Women also go out in trying to remember. Yes, women also are wrapped. Every funeral, yes. So the question is, they use the talus of the Chavar Kadisha, because I don't ever remember. Yeah, yes, that's the custom. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, but in the case of because they'll bring the body in the talus, but then the talus is going to be removed and returned to the family if it was the person's talus. It's considered to be the beneficial that the person's talus should be used. A man should be brought to burial in his own talus, which is a way of saying he has merits because he wore a talus. He prayed in a talus. So it's a way of wrapping him in a cloak of merit. But nevertheless, it's not the practice in Yerushalayim to actually bury in the talus. The talus is removed at the gravesite and then returned to the family. So we do have my father's talus back, and I'm holding on to it to decide who's going to be the lucky grandchild who is going to get the next one to get married, who's going to have the zchut of having that talus.
So then, I'm so sorry. So then a woman also gets taken.
Yeah, because think about it. We don't have a coffin. There's no coffin here. We're not using a coffin. So
right.
So the person is taken out to the gravesite. I'm trying to remember.
I think in a Sovave.
It's in the Sovave. Trying to remember. Not a talus, a Sovave. there was a minhag Yerushalayim long ago that was that a woman would be buried also in a Talus cotton. But that's something that has been abandoned. That's something that's not done anymore because she could have worn a Talus cotton in her lifetime. But this is in the Solveig. You're right. Who said?
I don't know
Barbara.
I don't know what a solveig
The
is.
Solveig is
you-
like it's like a Talus, but it's not. But it's without the. Not only does it not have tzitzis on it, but it's also not marked in the same way. I'm trying to remember.
It's in the aron. It's that big sheet in the aron, and
The
then when you
lining
put
sheet.
Paris into the aron with the tachrichim, you wrap that white sheet a certain way, and then you cover the.
I'm trying to.
and-
I'm
Okay.
trying to remember about how. Yeah, forgive me. Please forgive me because I can't remember and I should have checked. I don't remember. Now let's see. Okay, now I want to. We're sort of at time, but I think it's important to talk about Teskabin. So let's give a few more minutes. Now, when you're using the let's go. We're backtracking a little bit. The 9 measures of the water to do the tahara itself. So I just wanted to share with you something that's very powerful because the Teskabin is a measure that's used as a substitute for tahara in general. Like let's say a man, you can't use it for, a woman can't use this as a substitute for tevilas mitzvah. If she needs to go to the mikveh, she needs to go to a mikveh. She can't be satisfied with Teskabin, with using an overflow of a large measure of water that's used in contiguous flow over her. However, for certain types of tahara, for a man, let's say, who does need a mikveh, let's say because of carry or something like this, if he cannot get to a mikveh, an actual mikveh, but for cleansing, for taharat nefesh, he requires a mikveh. So there is an idea of a substitute, which is called using 9 measures, 9 kabin. Now, a kab is an actual halachic measure that's made up of riyu, 216 kibetza measures. That's its volume. So a kav, right? The kav, the Teskabin is 216 riyu. Now, what does it have to do with anything, and why should it make a difference? So that measure of 260 kibetza of egg volumes of water. So what is that actually? Meaning, why should the 9 make a difference? Why should that measure of water make a difference? Because it's kind of a substitute mikveh. The minimum dimension of a mikveh is 40 seah, right? 40 seah is the minimum displacement, considered to be minimum displacement of water of a human body. So the sages speak about it as being an amma upon an amma, like a minimum of 1.5 to 2 feet square, right? By amma, cubed, stacked, 3 of those, one on top of the other. Okay? Like that's the minimum dimension of a kosher mikveh for tevilah, is that it should be, think about it like, a square, a cube that's between 1.5 to 2 feet on each side, and then 3 of them stacked one upon the other. And that height, or laterally, it could be laterally or it could be above, but either way, they're stacked. So those are called, that's called 3 amma al amma, right? Cubes of an amma measure that are stacked upon another. And so the total volume is called tarmach tefach. Like if you were going to count it out in volume as tfachim, as handbreadths, it's 648. Now 648 is the word tirachim. You have to leave the math alone, but just it's the tefach, the number of tfachim of total handbreadth measures in that minimum volume of a mikveh, which you're substituting with your 9 measures of water because they have the same total volume, is called tarmach tfachim, is tirachim. It means have mercy, tirachim, 648, have mercy. So those nine measures that you're flowing in the tahara process of water upon the nifteris is your way of sharing the waters of chesed and rachamim, and that's the process of tahara itself. Is that God has mercy, that he wants his people to be purified, and he allows water to be the means through which they achieve purification. Tirachem, tirachem, tirachem. So as you're pouring your waters, to bear in mind that some total of coverage that's offered by this water is called you will be merciful. Tirachem, be merciful. Okay. I think we'll stop here. So we had wanted to discuss about other possible sessions, or you want to take time now, or I